After almost 71 years as monarch of England, Queen Elizabeth II has passed. People are calling Queen Elizabeth a colonizer and saying that they are going to dance on her grave at the end of the colonizer era. As they say that she's a colonizer, I've asked myself, how many colonies did she help to add to the Commonwealth? And how much power does she actually have? Today, we will answer both of these questions. So to answer the question, how many colonies did Queen Elizabeth help to start? I pulled up a list of the colonies of England on Wikipedia, and I searched through all of them to find out the ones that were colonized during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II. She became monarch in 1952, so we're looking for all colonies started from 1952 on. And here is the list. Wow, that's a long list. Yes, it is true that the only territory added to the Commonwealth during her time was Antarctica, which is a research station. And much of this Antarctica territory was already part of the Commonwealth prior to her becoming queen. So next, let's look at this colonizer and see how many colonies, how many territories left the Commonwealth during her reign. Wow. Really? Interesting. That one too? And that one? Huh. So if only one territory was added to the Commonwealth during her reign, and so many left the Commonwealth, how can people say that she was a colonizer? I've been able to come up with 3 reasons why somebody could claim that she is a colonizer. And let's look at all 3 of those reasons. First, she is a symbol of the empire. As a symbol of the empire, she is responsible for everything that happened in the past of the empire. By this argument, I'm complacent for the sins of my ancestors, and you're complacent for the sins of your ancestors. Therefore, many of us are colonizers, or slavers, or murderers, or so many other crimes. For this argument to work, Queen Elizabeth II is basically condemned for the crime of being born. Number 2, she did campaign to keep nations within the United Kingdom. All right, this one has a little more merit, because she did actively work to keep nations from leaving the United Kingdom. But if you think of the monarch as its original meaning, king meant head of household. She's the mom. If your children want to leave, you're of course going to try to convince them not to leave the family. And that's what Queen Elizabeth II was doing. Number 3, she did not stop the government from sending troops in order to quell rebellions. All right, this claim has a little more merit. But we really have to ask, how much power does the monarch of England really have? How much power did Queen Elizabeth have? And how much power does Charles III have now? For this, I will read directly from the royal family's website. Let me get my computer. It says, in a monarchy, a king or queen is head of state. The British monarchy is known as a constitutional monarchy. This means that while the sovereign is head of state, the ability to make and pass legislation resides within elected parliament. Although the sovereign no longer has a political or executive role, he or she continues to play an important part in the life of the nation. As head of state, the monarch undertakes constitutional and representational duties which have developed over 1,000 years of history. In addition to these state duties, the monarch has a less formal role as head of nation. The sovereign acts as a focus for national identity, unity, and pride, gives a sense of stability and continuity, officially recognizes success and excellence, and supports the ideal of voluntary service. So basically, according to the royal family's own website, the monarch is a figurehead. The monarch has no power within the government. What's up?
May I raise the idea, just because the monarch doesn't have any power within the government doesn't mean she doesn't have any power at all. Just because she doesn't have any political power doesn't mean that she doesn't have any sway over the people.
It's kind of strange, but legally she's not allowed to have an opinion with regards to the government.
But because she is the queen, people view her to have more power than that. And therefore she does have more power than that over that.
She cannot have an opinion outside of what the government says that her opinion is. So basically she was a figurehead with no real power. Even if she wanted to pull the troops back, she could not. When she gives a speech, the speeches she gives has to be what the government tells her to say. Why is that? Why does the monarch have no power? Notice that the website said over the past 1,000 years. So to find out why the monarchy has no power, we have to travel back 1,000 years. Many people would go back to 1215 during the reign of King John when the Magna Carta started. But I feel to really understand what's going on with the Magna Carta, we have to go back even further. So we'll go back to 1066 with the Norman invasion. In January of 1066, Edward the Confessor, the last Anglo-Saxon king, died. And when he died, there were 3 men that thought that they were promised the throne of England. So a battle ensued between the 3 men, or really a series of different battles. At the end of the year, William of Normandy was the victor and became the King of England. He is often referred to as William the Conqueror. Now, he was an absolute monarch. He had rule over everything. He had full power, and everything that he said happened. One of the things that he decided to do was he really liked to hunt. So he put together these forests, one of which is the famed Sherwood Forest. Now, when we think of a forest today, it's often public land. A lot of people go and visit the forests. I've been to many forests. But a forest in that time was land that was set aside for the king's use, and only the king's use. This is where we get the fable of Robin Hood, who is fighting against this oppression of the forests being only for the king. If you lived in certain villages that happened to be within the boundaries of a forest, if you were to collect firewood or hunt for your own food, you were breaking the law. As you can imagine, many people became upset about this, and not just the commoners, but the nobility as well, the barons, the earls, and the dukes. By the time we get to 1215 with the rule of King John, who was a very unpopular king, many of these minor nobility had had enough, and they forced King John to sign a document that we now refer to as the Magna Carta. It actually did very little good at the time because neither King John nor the nobles held up their end of the deal. However, shortly after that, after King John died, future kings were also forced to sign a similar document. These documents took some of the power away from the king and placed it on these minor nobles. Over the years, more and more of that power was taken away from the king, and that is where the House of Lords comes about. So here in the United States, we have the Senate and we have the House of Representatives. These make up the Congress. In England, you have Parliament instead, so you've got the House of the Lords, and now you have the House of Commons. So the House of Lords and House of Commons together hold the power that was once the monarchs. And by the time that Queen Elizabeth II took the throne, pretty much all the power had been transferred to the House of Lords and House of Commons. And while, yes, the royal family has a lot of money, they're not even allowed to sell most of their property. It doesn't really belong to them. It's held in trust by them. So while it may seem like the end of a colonizer's rule, Queen Elizabeth did not even have as much power as the average YouTube influencer today, because she was not allowed to state her own mind. She was not allowed to say her own feelings. She had to do what the government told her to say and do. In our next video, I'll be talking about Haile Selassie, who was the king of Ethiopia, and how he met AC Blue Eagle, an artist from Oklahoma.